you get a board of advisors around you when you need to make really important decisions. And getcovered.com is going to be that board of advisor or one of the advisors on your board. All right. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Business Life and Coffee podcast, and more specifically, this segment of Coffee Shop Q&A. Usually this is the time in the show where I bring in a really smart expert to talk about something that I know absolutely nothing about, or maybe I know a bit about, but they know more than I do. So imagine that you are at the coffee shop. You've got your favorite drink, whether it's tea or coffee or water, no discrimination here. But you're tuning in to two experts talk about something that's impactful to your business or your life. And this week is unique because we're going to talk about something that's important for both your business and your life, and that's health insurance. We're joined by Silas Jessup, who is an agency manager at HealthMarkets Insurance Agency. And we're going to talk about the state of the healthcare market, some of the opportunities that exist, and really just some myths about healthcare options if you're in between jobs. So Silas, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely, Joey. Thanks for having me today.
My pleasure. And hey, Silas, before we hit recording, and by the way, this episode is sponsored by Get Covered. But when we were talking offline, you said that agency manager is just one of the titles that you have. What's your favorite hat that you wear in life?
Well, honestly, my favorite hat is probably that of a father. I have 3 young children, and so 8, 11, and 13. And so they're the ones who drive everything that I do in the professional world. And quite candidly, what I do on the professional side of the business helps support them. So that's probably the best title that I have. But on a day-to-day basis, I'm an insurance agent. I work directly with consumers. I also lead a team of agents and advisors. I have a little over 90 advisors under my umbrella. And so in addition to doing the work myself, I also recruit and hire and train and mentor agents to be successful in the insurance business.
Yeah, no, I love it. So we're talking about healthcare, right? And we're talking about its importance. This moment that we're in right now, COVID-19, no matter when a person is consuming this podcast, they undoubtedly felt the effect in some way of COVID on their life and on the business either that they own or that they work for. And we've seen, well, first, let me back up a little bit, right? So the way that healthcare traditionally typically works is that it's tethered to your employer. And then the reality is that millions of Americans lost their jobs and thereby lost their employer. And yeah, there are options out there now to for healthcare. But my question for you is, what are millions of unemployed Americans doing to handle their healthcare? Like, what's the state of healthcare for the unemployed right now?
Yeah, certainly. Well, it's a very scary thing, honestly, for many people to be thrust out of a group employer environment. Not only are they losing their income, but they're also losing their benefits and trying to explore, what options are available. We've seen millions of folks who have actually lost coverage and sought our guidance this year. With layoffs and furloughs and the small businesses really struggling, it's a very, very real problem. And I think most employees who work for a corporation that provided benefits, they had an HR person who was doing this work for them and making a recommendation, and they, quite frankly, just followed that recommendation. www.getcovered.com is a great resource for folks who are seeking counsel and input and guidance on what options are available to them. So that's a good starting point. To your question about what do people do, it really depends on each individual circumstances. For most folks, there's probably multiple paths that they should or could consider to get private insurance. Oftentimes there's a COBRA option. COBRA is just an extension of their group insurance. And so that's something that a lot of people should look at as they're leaving an employer, if that's a viable option. And there are times that may make a lot of sense.
And let me pause there, Silas,
Sure.
just to talk even about my experience in the HR space is that not every employer informs people of their options and opportunities upon transition, maybe because they don't even know themselves. So it's super impactful that we're having this conversation today, because some people may not know what COBRA is, or what, if it was available to them, and even how long it's available for you after you leave a job. But I'm glad you're here to help people navigate these waters. So I just want to interject there. Long story short, your HR team may not know all the answers, so you need to go out and make sure that you're covered and you're protected. Please continue.
And we see that in the consumers that we serve. Many times they weren't given proper notification of what options were even available to them from the employer. Typically, when someone leaves a group employer program and that company had more than 20 employees, usually there is some sort of a COBRA option and that continuation option. For somebody who's changing and transitioning mid-year, sometimes that's a wonderful option to at least bridge them through the end of the year, because it might prevent them from having to reset deductibles and out-of-pockets mid-year. And so that is certainly something that we want to explore and make sure we understand before we go a different direction.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I hear you say, Silas, is that there's a strategy involved, and it's important to have the right partners on your team and working on your behalf, whether they're on your former employer or if they're through the Get Covered website, so that you can figure out what's the most beneficial path for you to move forward.
Absolutely.
From a health insurance perspective and from a dollars perspective.
Right. You know, there's a number of other things that we encourage people to look at as far as other viable options. You know, maybe there's a spouse's group insurance that you could jump on. Anytime there's access to group insurance through an employer platform, that's something that I encourage people to look at. Some people, if their income is dropped because they're no longer working, the state Medicaid programs may be viable. And if someone can qualify based on income, that's certainly something that they should look at. We also have federal programs like Medicare. So if someone is over age 65 and losing their group insurance or possibly disabled, and then the other big option where we really operate within is that individual market. And there's several paths in the individual market that can be explored. Most people have probably heard about the Affordable Care Act and the federal and state health exchange marketplaces that have developed under that. Obviously, it's very driven by the state that you reside in as far as what options are available. But a good advisor should be able to walk you through that and help you navigate not only what options are available, but the potential of qualifying for government subsidies based on household size and income. And sometimes those subsidies can be very, very impactful in helping to kind of mitigate that monthly premium that a consumer might have to pay.
I love
There's
it.
There's also a few other options in that private sector. Over the last several years, private insurance and specifically short-term or limited duration policies have also really surged in popularity, especially for higher income folks who are fairly healthy. There are some creative alternatives out there outside of the ACA that may be very, very viable as well. And so the big takeaway here, I think, is that there are a lot of options, but each individual consumer's situation is very uniquely different.
Yeah.
An organization like ours or getcovered.com can really give, the consumers the information they need to make some good decisions and kind of follow through on what's going to be best to protect themselves and their family.
Yeah. I was laid off from my last employer, and laid off when I was under the age of 26. So I was in a unique spot where I could join my parents' plan, but there came a time where I had to navigate the waters and pick a plan for myself. And so I did utilize one of those temporary plans that you mentioned. Yep. But if it weren't for resources and sites online like Get Covered, I wouldn't have known what my options are. And I would have either had to hop on my, at that point I was too old to be on my player's plan. So I'd have been flying solo. I would have had no kind of coverage. And even though I was a reasonably healthy guy, right? There's always the and the need for, urgent care visits or ER visits or prescriptions or glasses or dental care. And if you're paying that stuff out of pocket, there is a better way. And so I think what your team is doing, Silas, is a godsend for people who want to figure out how to take the money that they do have and spend it in the right way to protect their families.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, I teach and train to the reality that we're educators and advisors. It's our job to really engage with that consumer and help them understand what their options are. But it's also our job to ask the right questions to help them understand where their risk and where their gaps in coverage are. I think one of the biggest roles that we play as advisors in this business is to help people self-identify needs that maybe they didn't even know that they had. So many people focus on that medical expense. But what a lot of people don't think about downstream a little bit is, okay, so I have a massive heart attack, or I have a major accident, or I'm diagnosed with cancer. I not only have these medical bills to deal with, but I also most likely have some large deductibles to deal with. I might have some lost income to deal with. And so I believe that a good advisor really looks at that entire picture and asks the right questions to really understand what kinds of resources someone has and what kind of assets they're trying to protect, so that we can pull different pieces from different places and custom design, the right solution for that person. It kind of goes back to what I said earlier. Everybody's situation is uniquely different. And honestly, that's one of the reasons why I love the work that I do, is each time I sit down to consult with a customer or a consumer, it's a uniquely different puzzle that I'm trying to work through and figure out to try to give them the best protection that we can.
Yeah. I think the big mindset that we have to wrap our brains around, and it kind of goes into the question that I have, which, we've had such a great conversation already. You kind of answered it, but I wanted to frame this question. We're not all the same. And so I think even if plans and options aren't necessarily tailored to one specific individual, I think there are enough options and opportunities out there for you to pick through a list of options and find one that's truly right for you. And so my question for you, I kind of led with it, but do you think there's an opportunity to make the health insurance market better serve employed and unemployed American families? I guess your response is going to be yes, with strategy and awareness and sites like Get Covered. But as a professional in the space, what are we not doing that, or what are we not receiving that we could be receiving?
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, I would agree. I would just add the education piece to it. I feel like so many consumers who are coming out and purchasing their own insurance, oftentimes for the first time in their life, they're so ill-informed and so undereducated. And so I think the biggest gap is connecting the uninformed consumers with the guidance and counsel that they need to navigate their options. And there's a lot to this. It's overwhelming. It's confusing. There's so many options to choose from. And then there's the downstream impacts of those decisions. What if this happens? To kind of think through. And so I would say there are a lot of resources out there. We've referenced getcovered.com a few times in our conversation today. And that is a really neat resource that gives consumers the ability to come in and really look at what options are available. There's literally a decision tree within that website where people can answer a few questions and get pointed towards some of the best options that they should begin exploring. They can even take it a level deeper and punch in their zip code and some of their basic demographic information and get quotes, and take it clear through the point of actually enrolling if that's what they choose to do online. And in many situations, especially with these short-term or limited duration plans, a consumer can have coverage in place in within 24 hours, by the next day. So obviously with these kinds of resources out there, it's made it much easier for the consumers who want the guidance and counsel to receive that. I would also say through the Get Covered website, there's the ability to connect directly with a local advisor. And I would highly recommend that. I think there in almost every community across the country, there are agents and advisors like myself and my team who are willing to sit down with consumers face to face or in a virtual setting like this or telephonically and really educate them and walk them through the options that are available to them. I think that that's really, really important to get someone to guide you through that. I kind of joke about it. You know, I have advisors in many facets of my life. I mean, I have a CPA, I have an attorney. You know, I have different people that give me input on what I should be doing. And I think an insurance advisor, especially when you're navigating this on your own as an individual or as a small business, you know, many of the folks that we serve are getting started in business. I thought it was kind of interesting what you said about, you know, your past and your experience. It sounds like the potential, and I don't know if this is your story or not, but it sounds like a layoff, an inability to control what happened kind of drove you towards working in a self-employed capacity and working out on your own and starting your own company. Is that accurate?
I did have a plan in place to have a business. I think the layoff just accelerated that. But what you mentioned is the reality for so many people that I have on my show, so many people who start their business or side business. They're shaken by the fact that someone else is in control of their fate, or they believe that someone else is in control of their fate, and they want to take that control back by way of starting a business. So what you said is it hits the nail for so many people who go from entrepreneur to go on to big and better things, because one day they decided that I'm going to take the reins and be the leader. I had plans to do it. It's just that they just had layoffs and I wasn't in control of that. So when I left, my website was already done. I was already doing consulting on the side. But to your point, that is the reality that sometimes we're not in between jobs. Sometimes we're just getting our consulting practice together or taking our hobby and making it and monetizing it. And we still need health insurance throughout that process.
Well, and we've seen a lot of that here, especially during the course of 2020. A lot of people who, through nothing they could control, lost whatever opportunity they had in front of them from an employment perspective and decided to strike out on their own. Some of the best clients that I work with, and I say best in that I enjoy working with them the most, are those self-employed entrepreneurs who are hanging their own shingle and starting their own gig and chasing their dream. And I think it's just so cool that there's so many people that actually do that. And if I can lend a hand along the way and help and guide them how they can protect their assets and mitigate rate increases and maximize tax advantages on the insurance front, that's a pretty gratifying position to fill.
Yeah. So we've talked about getcovered.com, and we've circled around the name and some of the things. But if we could park the conversation for a second and unpack some of the features and benefits of getcovered.com. Who's it for? What will you find there? And why should you, even while you're listening to this episode, go over and hop on getcovered.com and see what's there?
Yeah, definitely. So getcovered.com was really originally built as a resource for consumers who are responsible for their own benefits. Whether it's because somebody's, between jobs, maybe self-employed, like we said, hanging their own shingle, or they just work for an employer who doesn't offer benefits. This is a wonderful resource. Through that getcovered.com website, you can get answers, you can get help, and you can actually get covered. There's actually a platform where you can actually apply for coverage and get your coverage in place. You can even connect locally with an insurance advisor in your backyard and actually get connected to somebody who would meet with you face to face. The advisors that actually work behind getcovered.com represent over 200 different insurance carriers on a national basis. So they really are well versed in all of the different options that are available. And, I know there's also people out there who maybe don't want to work directly with an advisor, or they want to try to figure this out on their own a little bit. Through getcovered.com, you can select your own options. It's got a full suite of quoting and application tools that can help someone get covered, like I said earlier, as quickly as the next day. So it's a wonderful resource. There's also a free download that's available on getcovered.com. It's a PDF download, but it's really a great resource that kind of gets people started. A lot of people coming into this arena and beginning to search for private insurance on their own, they're starting from scratch and they have no clue where to even begin. And so that free download that's available on the website is really some good talking points and things that they should be thinking through as they're beginning to navigate that individual space.
Yeah. Well, Silas, one thing my audience knows is that I wouldn't put people on the podcast or a product or service on the podcast that I didn't personally believe in, or that I didn't wish I had at a time when I needed it. And I think for someone who's listening to this, knowing that my background in HR and the experience that I have in HR, people dread that whole open enrollment season of like picking benefits and the fear of, oh no, did I overpay? Did I underpay? Did I get the right plan for me? Well, getcovered.com kind of helps you in this area because it allows you on your own time and on your own terms to figure this whole health insurance thing out. And that's incredibly important because, and I could go into the weeds on this. I won't because I would probably bore the audience. But, picking a plan, that's the difference between how much you pay in a copay when it's time for you to go to the doctor. It's how much are you paying when you go to urgent care and, your kid has the sniffles. It's, defining what doctors are in network and out of network and how much you have to pay for them. And it's, how much are you paying from a monthly expense? Because we all budget our dollars on a monthly basis. And so getcovered.com, it really is a way for you to brush up on how smart you are with health insurance. And, we're going into that season of open enrollment, but you're going to get together with your family and friends and topics come up. And I think one of the important topics is, how are we protecting our families? How are we making good decisions around our healthcare? And I truly believe that getcovered.com is that place where you should start that conversation. And you might be surprised at what you learn. So that's my thoughts on it. And purely, from a place of really believing in Get Covered and what it's about and what it's attempting to do. And what it's doing for so many Americans. I say American, not necessarily like from the patriotic standpoint, but just because the parameters around healthcare for this, we do have an international audience. But this is for the U.S. and this is for plans that are in the U.S. So those are my thoughts on it.
Absolutely. And the only other thing I would add there, Joey, is, this is a service that's completely free. There's no cost associated with this particular service.
Yep.
Even if a consumer decides to take action through the Get Covered, suite of quoting tools and application tools, or they decide to connect with a local agent. First of all, it's agnostic. So they have various carriers and product lines that they can look at. But there's also no cost to it. Whether someone goes and tries to figure this out on their own or they tap into a resource like Get Covered, there's no cost difference. So that's really important too. I think a lot of times when consumers first engage with me, that's one of the biggest questions that they have is, oh my goodness, how much is this going to cost me in addition to my insurance premiums? And, the work that we do is at no cost to the consumer. So that's an important note to make.
Yeah, absolutely. Free is always good. Sometimes people are skeptical about free. They always say never trust the free lunch. At least that's one of the 48 laws of power, which is a conversation for another time. But in this instance, free is a good thing. And, the way that it is supported is through other means. But for your benefit, go on the site, browse, engage, pick some plans, shop around, and it's likely that your HR department isn't going to tell you everything you need to know. Yeah, no, this has been a great conversation. I hope we have brought some topics to the audience today that are really impactful. So if you're listening to this, send out a tweet of how this was impactful. And is there anything else that we should know about Get Covered? Any specific tips, tools, or things that people will find there?
So I just want to comment on something you said about HR departments not fully understanding all of this. And I would agree with that. They've got their hands full on a number of different things that they're dealing with.
Yep.
I had three calls this morning with different HR departments, just asking questions through how does a transition look? What does it look like for a consumer who's over 65? We had one situation where a spouse was retiring from another company and looking at what their options were when they turned age 65 around Medicare age. And there's just a lot of complexities. When you start putting Medicare and group health insurance and Affordable Care Act all together, there's just a lot of nuances to that. And so I would certainly recommend engage with a professional, engage with somebody who knows what they're talking about when it comes to this. And I think getcovered.com is a great place to start with that, process.
Yeah, I agree. And like you said earlier, Silas, I kind of want to end on this note. You get a board of advisors around you when you need to make really important decisions, and getcovered.com is going to be that board of advisor or one of the advisors on your board when it comes to selecting a plan for your healthcare for yourself and your family. So make sure you check out the website. That's getcovered.com. This episode was brought to you by getcovered.com. And I know and believe that the value that's there is going to help change your life and protect your life and protect the life of your family members. So, Silas, thanks for coming on to the podcast, man. I really enjoy it. Go check in with your kids, man. See how they're doing.
Sounds good. Thank you, Joey. I appreciate your time today.
Oh, my pleasure. We got to have you on again sometime. Take care.
You too.
All right.